Cool. So I get the honor of kicking off our meeting again. Welcome everyone. And it seems like we had a pretty good week. I saw the PRs open. I haven't had a chance to leave any comments myself, but I saw that several other people had. And so we're going to start off with demos. And just a thing to keep in mind, you may have read this or understood this already, but we're in this team setting, as mentors, we're kind of like part of the team. Sometimes it's described as a senior developer on your team. Other times it's described as a product owner, but your demo should and can be technical. So you can give us the kind of the visual side of things, show us either running, I guess it won't be in production because the PRs aren't merged yet, but on your local instance, running it there. And then we can dive into code and you can talk about some of the decisions that you made as pairs, and any questions that you had along the way that you'd like the rest of the team's feedback on. And yeah, so deployment previews. Perfect. So is that a link in the MR where you can just click and see what that looks like? Awesome. Let me see. Does everybody else understand what that is? I haven't looked at that yet.
No.
Okay, so
It's part of the PR at the very end. It's a GitHub action. Right after one of the first times it'll be, I can share a screen so you could see real quick.
oh, I see. Yeah, the first comment on the PR has a link to where you can view the app with your PR applied. So you can use that instead of something local. So with that said, which pair would like to go first? And then, you can decide within your pair how you want to present. If you want one person to do all the talking, if you want to hand it off, however you want to do it. Or one person could do the visual, one person could talk about the code. Do I have a volunteer pair to go first?
Yeah, we can go first. It's fine.
All right. Viviana and Dana, it is.
Okay, so okay, I can like show it and then you talk about the code, Dana, or how do you want to do it?
I will meet you where we are. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good.
That
So
sounds
start
good.
sharing. Okay, so do I start sharing my screen? Okay. We've done this for big groups. This will be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the first issue, which was being able to read from and write to the database. So I have it running here. Oh, how do I get this to move? Okay, so this is what it looks like. We've tested this a bunch of times, as you can see. So let's see. Showing the console. So if you click, sorry, all the Zoom things are in the way. Okay, so if you click send a database, you'll see it pops up a bunch of times. And then in the console, we'll have, we printed out like the ID that comes with it. And then you can see here in the database, is it? I think it's the Firestore database. Yeah, okay. And then here, so we first started out just a user. So this is testing it at first. And then we made another one called list. So you can see it being populated here. Yeah, and then I don't know if Dana, you want to talk about like the actual code that went into it?
Yeah, sure. And
Yeah,
thank you
okay.
to whoever added corn and chocolate. Much appreciated. I put it in green beans, and that is definitely not what I wanted to put in that list, but that was the only thing that came to mind. This was my first experience with using Firebase. So it was a really great learning experience because together with Viviana, we were able to read some documentation, check out some blogs, and then try and see how, like, what the starter code, what it did, and how the pieces fit together. So let me see if I can see your code. Do you want me to pull it up on my screen, or do you have the code showing now?
Yeah, I stopped sharing if you want to go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead. Thank you. Let's go ahead. Let me make sure I'm going to be sharing the right thing. Share. Okay, you should be able to see the code base now. I'm gonna get rid of some of this and move that over here. And move this way down. Okay. Let's see where we want to start. So in this file that we have, list.js, what we're doing is, and you can see my pointer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we're doing is we're importing collection and on snapshot from Firebase Firestore. We're also importing DB, and we're importing add doc. And so our understanding of those things is we made a function, Viv and I made a function to set state and hold state for the things that we wanted to put in the cloud database. So down here on line 24, you see those green beans that are populating the list. And how we got that to work is we were able to, on line 7, that's the variable we're setting for what we want to put into the database and how we are updating it in the use effect. So we set a variable for our database and we're pushing our list into the snapshot of our collection. And so this is my first kind of example of talking about this. So if I use the wrong word, please don't hesitate to interrupt me and correct me. But basically what we're doing is we're pushing it into our collection. We're also giving it an ID, and then we're putting it back out on the page, just essentially. That was a big curve, like to figure out how all those things went together, to be able to say, okay, this is how we instantiate our database. This is how we set it. This is how we turn it on. This is how we get things in it. Then once we got that working, we went just over to the page itself and we put something in there to see if that worked also. And we were like, yay, that works also. So once, both parts were talking to each other, then we began to say, you know what, perhaps we don't want to, have Ada Lovelace 17 times on the page. What are we going to be building, and how can we start to think about functionality for that? So we thought about an item and a quantity and being able to send those with a click through so that we had the starter of a list.
Very nice. So your the top part, and this is my first time looking at this one. I started on the other PR, so I didn't quite get to yours. The top one there is holding your state, and then the second one is where you're sending that to the database. Is that right?
That is correct.
Second one being send data there, and then what's below that?
Below the send data is where we return the data out into the UI.
Nice.
So you can see the button here where we're sending the data to the back end, and then how we're pulling the docs variable back through, iterating through it, and creating a list item for each particular record that comes back from the collection.
Got it. Very cool.
That was a big deal for me. So it was an exciting challenge to work through, particularly having zero understanding going in, like how it would work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like the biggest thing we kept, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I'm in a similar spot of having not worked with this. So this is new to me. And you explained it well. Thank you. Viv,
what was that the function that we weren't aware of? That was the
it was like get Firestore is in the firebase.js file. So yeah, I think like the biggest thing that we kept coming into was just like not knowing what functions we needed. And there's just so many that you could use. So it was kind of overwhelming when we were looking at different blog posts, like there are different approaches. And then some imports were older and like would conflict with the other. So that was fun getting to figure out like which ones we actually needed to use. Oh yeah, so like the get Firestore one was one that we came across.
Exactly. Sorry for not showing like the guts of it. But we set up our configuration in an object with the key and the domain and all the like boilerplate stuff that had been set up for us. So we set a variable there, and then we able to initialize it with our configuration, and we get our database by setting it to the variable, and then we imported that in the other file.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Does anybody else have comments or questions for Viviana and Dana?
I thought you both did a really great job. Typically, I've seen past cohorts where Collabs with struggle against this one between the two issues. Like this one is the Meteor one, and Firebase is weird.
Yeah.
When I say it to the room, there are some things like it just doesn't make sense. And even from the last time that I look at this, this is a newer version, and how you do config typically would trip people up. And I want to highlight the use of the environment variable. That is excellent. We don't set the repo using environment variables because we thought it might be too complicated, but you already have that understanding. So that was very nice to see. So good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll go head over to Dev and Rafa.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
That sounds good.
So yeah. So I just did npm start just like a couple moments ago. And then so this is let me go full screen. So our prompt was basically to create two pages, a list view page and an add view page. And once you go on the respective pages, we had to create like a button or some sort of thing where when you click on it, it highlights. I mean, it turns the button or the hyperlink into bold, and then also it, depending on which page you go to, it should hit the right route path. So if you go to add view page, it's the add one, and then for the list one, we just have like the slash. So it's just the 3000. We weren't sure if we were supposed to do like have like its own like slash list like URL. We just kept it like as the home page for now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I guess Rafa can show the code behind it. Yeah, you can share your screen.
So as far as the code, like the main parts that we added were three JSX components, add item view and list view, which are both just divs with the header showing which page that you're on. And then we created a custom component called a route link, where we imported link, which is what this is based off of, use match and use resolve path from React Router to be able to pass in the children, which is the text that link will be showing, and to, which is the route that it links to. And we use resolve path. To my knowledge, I believe that it pulls down like what the current URL is, like it resolves that, and then let match. Sorry, the match variable will return, use match will return null if the current path does not match the resolve path. That was passed in as 2, or it will, I believe it returns the path. So we put the link inside a fragment so we can avoid having like styling issues, say if it were within a div. And for now, so the font weight becomes either bold or normal, depending on if the route matches, the route of the link matches what's the URL that's currently there. So in terms of integrating that into the app itself, we created our separate routes as Dev showed at /add or the root. And we have the links here and a nav with the 2 being each route passed into it. And we also added some CSS just to make it centered and look pretty or neat. But yeah. And Yenly, I did see your comment about why we didn't use navlink instead. I'll just say we just didn't notice it. There was an example on the sidebar of the docs that showed how to use custom link, and so we just followed that. Yeah.
When you were discussing the use of fragment, you had mentioned some styling issues you encountered without it. I've known, at least to date, fragment being used to group multiple elements without adding an additional element or node to the DOM, I suppose. Is there an advantage that I'm unaware of when using Fragment in this use case?
It was more so like looking forward, say we wanted to use that component in other instances. I felt if it was wrapped in a div, then perhaps there could be issues with styling in that sense, because it would be an extra container around it instead of inserting the link itself into the DOM.
I see, because I think when rendered on the page, the fragment will just be removed from the DOM, as far as I'm aware. So I don't know if it existing there actually does anything other than add another thing into another 2 set of lines into our return. If you open the development console, I think you might see what I'm talking about, where if you poke around in there, I think we would only need an additional div if we had a second child element sitting next to the link. But I think in this case, I don't think it's actually doing anything.
Well, yeah, my understanding of it is probably incorrect as well.
I didn't even notice that at first. But yeah, Fragment is really useful when you're trying to group multiple things without wrapping them in yet another element. But in this case, it doesn't hurt any more than it helps. But thank you for the demo and the code explanation. Did anybody have any other questions about the demo or the code?
I really like the thought process you included in the description. It gave me a really good kind of context as to how you solved the problem and the things you had tried. And before even looking at the code, I feel like I was there with you in the development process, and that helped me review the code better. So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
There was something I did want to bring up that maybe we should discuss as a group. Dana and Viv, they did mention being confused about why we put the list view inside the root route instead of having a separate list route. And maybe that's something we can discuss, whether we want a dedicated homepage or if we want the component to just be mounted onto that index.
Yeah, I guess we don't know until we know the shape of the app will take, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So my question would be, if you had it at a list route, what would you show at the home route, or what would you do if someone went to the home route?
I think in the new issues, it looks like that on the front page of the app, the home route, or when you initially load it up, that we'll be adding like a 3-word token. So there's going to be a different view. So it'll probably change this week, is what I assume.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. So it's kind of one of those things that if you know those things ahead of time, sometimes you might kind of do your groundwork for it when you're doing the earlier issues. But if you don't know that, then you just kind of like do the thing that's in front of you, and you can always change it later.
Sounds
I
good.
do want to comment. It's a great idea to make it into components. You can change it really easily. I thought it was really great that you did a custom component for your nav link. It's creative. Like there's many ways to do the same thing, and there's no wrong way. And I do like the way that you explain it. That was pretty great. And yeah, props to Dana on looking ahead and seeing like, oh, what are we building? That's also a good exercise in future jobs. Like as you're building something, you can peek ahead to get a sense of what's coming to help you shape the decisions you make while you're building. All right, are we ready to move on to the next module?
I think we're ready. Good job, everyone. Thanks.
So ready for this next module. I would love to learn about this.
Let's see. All right, let me know if you don't see my screen. So CoReviews. We purposely want you to go through the process of code review without doing this module first to get a sense of how it's done. And then today we're going to talk about it. I'm going to try this presenter view. Code reviews. What is a code review? We're going to cover the code review cycle, what makes a code review a great code review, and how I can help others review my code. This is like pretty high on my list because it's very important. And how can I review other people's code, especially if you feel like I came in, I'm just a junior. How can I review a senior developer's code review? And I can share a story of it happened to me recently. And then exploring code in GitHub. So what is a code review? So I want to make sure we're all on the same mindset of what it is. It's not about making right or wrong code. It's about a conversation of a set of changes. Code review, especially with pull requests, is a way to share knowledge and learn from each other. It's an artifact that you create as a team that you can come back to and reference. Like, let's say a month or 2 months from now, we're going to come back to this particular feature and we're going to add more. And there could be some decisions that we make at this point that we don't know what our future would be, right? So we come back and realize, okay, that decision is not probably the best way. Or you look at the code and you're like, why? And PRs and code review is a way to go back and look at it and go, oh, okay, I see why we made that decision. Now, how can we do better? So I want you to think of it as it's a collaboration space where you share your work and you ask questions. And I'm going to repeat that again, where you can ask questions. It's definitely okay. And it helps you improve as a developer. It's the process of, especially when you're working and learning in public, doing code reviews and creating PRs is a way to communicate that to your team. And it helps your team kind of decentralize knowledge, right? We don't want one 10x engineer who knows everything. We don't want to work with that 10x engineer who's going to create all this code. We want to share the responsibility of what our code base is like. So you may not be working on this feature, but to review this code is to get a sense of it's sharing context. You may not understand it today, or you just have a general sense of it, but coming back to it later, it makes more sense. And it's a great way to have conversation with your team. And it improves the code quality overall to do code reviews. The code review cycle. So here is like you open a pull request, and it could be a draft one as you're working and you're making notes, notes to yourself, notes to whoever is interested. And once you get to a good state, you could set it to ready for review. And that's when you let your teammates and people know, like, hey, I want feedback on this. But I do want to point out that you can ask for feedback even when you're ready. That's the benefit of working in the open. So when you receive feedback, you make changes. And then this middle part with the receive feedback and make changes, that can go many rounds depending on when you are. And one suggestion that I would say is like, when you don't want to wait till near the very end to ask for feedback. It benefits everyone to ask for feedback early on, as soon as you're ready. And it's, even if you're not really ready, sometimes I feel it's great to ask for feedback. I've definitely benefited from that and getting a lot of, for my onboarding, just kind of self-review, writing some stuff, and you don't know who's looking and who's willing to help. There are many times where I'm working on something and I'm still missing context or something, and my team lead had saw what I'm working on and chimed in and go, hey, have you thought about this? And it's great because you want to think about all the different edge cases. And it's good to not have to be like the only person who's responsible for all that. So I want you to think about the code review cycle to be that. And then once all the changes have been made and it's good, then you can merge. It's a really good feeling to press that merge button. So I want to encourage all you to get to that point as soon as you're ready. You don't have to wait for approval for us sometimes. So what makes a code review a great code review? So number one, we don't want to focus on stylistic changes because there's lots of tooling to help with that, right? Like prettier ESLint, type checkers. I don't want to be the one person who's nitpicking and go, you use 2 spaces and not 4. Those are not productive conversation. Productive conversation is, how can we do this better? How can, you know, how can the code be clear to write, or like, will we understand this a month from now? That is like core. I do want to keep pointing that out. And then one thing is you want to try out the feature locally or in a test environment. What I really love right now with tooling is there's the deployment preview. So you can click around, check it out, see how it works. I still pull it out and run it locally so that I can see the console logs. I can, especially if a feature or what you're building is really complex, it helps to play around with the variables to understand what's going on, because then that informs, that gives me, I'm coming from a place of like, oh, how does this work? Why do we do this? And those are important conversations to have together. And also praise your teammate. It feels good when it's not to point out what's wrong, it's to point out the things that you want to see happen again, like the environment variables, or having really clean code, or just making good choices. You want the other person to know, like, hey, you made a good choice here. I like to see this again. And it just feels better. And the thing about here, it says default to approval, is it's about trust. You're trusting that, let's say one of the PRs, Tanner this morning had said, oh yeah, these console logs, I don't really like that, but you know, or I prefer not to see this in the code base. But at the end of the day, I will still approve your PR, because I trust that you're going to come back, look at this and go, oh yeah, I left that in by accident. People with many experience still accidentally leave console logs. So I wouldn't like not approve it because of minor things. The bigger picture of things is you want to approve it and help somebody move along in their work. And then it's important to be kind and empathetic, because sometimes we have off days and we can't always remember everything. So those are kind of mindsets to keep in mind when you're doing a code review. So 7 is you want to help others understand your changes. I'll go more into detail for that. And then try to answer all the questions, even if it seems like, oh, that person should know. It's like the reason people ask is because they don't understand. And our job is to help other people understand our code, because it benefits everybody on the team. We want to empower other people to be able to pick up our code and add more without having to knock on a door or like, hey, explain every single detail to them every time that they need to work on this, because you could be on vacation at that time. Nobody wants to answer calls when you're on vacation. And then take your time doing a code review. It's important to understand the code. So one thing about being an engineer is it's not all about writing code. The percentage time that you really write code could be pretty small. A lot of it is communicating. A lot of it is reviewing other people's code, and also having conversations and talking to others about how to build something. Yep, I think I talked about this. Run the code. It's great because it gives you confidence. It's very clear when something works and doesn't work. You can play around with it, try out the variables. And so this is where in a PR, if you include instructions on how to run the code and how to test, it helps your reviewer to, you know, they scan your PR, see, okay, I need to do this and this. Like with both your PRs this week, you needed to include a library. So if your PR had instructions on make sure you run npm install, not everybody knows like, oh, right, there's a new package here. So when you call that out, the other person knows, they run it, they wouldn't have the confusion of like, oh, why aren't things working when in reality they're just missing a package. And then ask questions. It's a great learning opportunity. So I started at my new job in May, and one of the senior team leads, he's been working on this refactoring effort for like 6 months. and he's putting in X state, like a state machine thing in React. And he was doing way advanced things in use effects that I've never seen before. And I was like, I'm gonna co-review this. And there's a Twitter joke that someone had posted like, I have no clue what this is, but it looks good to me, approve. So I was very tempted to add that, but as I was looking through some of the stuff, it was more of like, the expectation is not that I have to understand everything, but if there are certain things that aren't clear, like no matter how busy he is, I should ask, because I will be touching that code eventually, which I end up doing. And it's okay to also ask again later, right? A lot of these things is you learn by repetition. So then here is a super important thing, and it's very meaningful to me, is how can I help others review my code? One, you want to add a meaningful PR description. Concise is better, because one, you don't want to write a whole novel, because I think one of the resources I'm going to share, I'll show right here, is, so I really love this article. It's like how to make your code reviewer fall in love with you. And one of the golden rule is value your reviewer's time. Everybody's busy. You at some point will be very busy. You want to be heads down and working on your feature, but it benefits your teammate to review their code. So if you think about it, if your PR have all the information, all the meaningful description, pretty concise, pretty direct, then I can come in, look at it and see, okay, I know what this PR is trying to do. Then it makes it easier for me to review your code instead of pushing it off and pushing it off, because that could happen when things get busy. One thing I do want to highlight too is self-review your code. What does that mean? Sometimes your code can be self-explanatory. There's a video that I can share, which is Sarah Drasner doing the art of comments, is explaining the whys. Instead of saying this variable is equal to this, it's a hard-coded variable. You at that moment may know what that means, but would the you next year remember that? And would somebody else on another team who inherits your code understand what that hard-coded variable is for? So definitely self-review your code. If it's something that you can't make it a part of your code, then this is where you set up your PR and then you go in and look at your changes and think about, oh, will this be clear to my reviewer? If it's a little fuzzy, then add comments. Also, if you are like, let's say the Firebase stuff that Dana and Viviana did, like there are information that is very valuable that they did in their research. They can grab those URLs and drop it in like the config file. And then for any future person who looks at this, we'd be like, I don't understand why they made a choice to use this particular function. But if you have something in your comment, they don't have to hunt you down. And that is like a good objective. And it also makes others review it faster, and then you can smash that merge and then you're done. So screen capturing tools. So one feedback is you can do a screen capture. You can highlight certain areas that are new. You can do, especially if it's functional things, it's good to do a video capture. I use Zappy all the time to really communicate what I'm doing, especially on the front end. Sometimes, I guess the Firebase too, you can do that as well. It's just thinking about, if I take a quick look, I see a GIF of what is happening, what's expected behavior. So when I'm reviewing your code and I see that it's not, then I can give you a better feedback than to jump from assumptions. And then exploring code in GitHub. You can do it by exploring commit by commit here. So you do the files, and I think you can kind of filter it by commit. So typically, like if you make your PR or like your setup changes small enough, you don't have to do this. But in the case of like that really large refactoring effort by the senior dev, and there's so many changes that he did over like 6 months. For me as a new person, it's like, oh, like it was helpful to learn the code base by going through different commits and seeing a smaller chunk of changes versus like one massive thing that didn't make sense to me. And it's okay. It's also okay to say, hey, none of this makes sense to me. And then one way that you can mark your review files as viewed on the right side, it's more of just easier for you to navigate, make sure like, oh, hey, I looked at this one, it looks fine. And as you collapse it, then it just makes it easier to go through, especially when it's a large feature that you're reviewing. So I've done some of these before. It took me many reviews and close to like more than a week to review that PR, just to like look at it, do something else, come back. Cool. So I think I covered most of this stuff. Here we want to have like a conversation with everybody in terms of like what have been your experience in the past with code reviews? How did it feel to code review this week? And how has it felt over the last week or in your previous experiences to have your code reviewed? Anybody would like to share their thoughts?
Yeah, I can go. I thought like the way Collab Lab does the code reviews and how we put emphasis on like code reviews is like really good, great. I never was like really accustomed to like having code reviews so detailed, putting so much importance into it. But I think Dana and Viviana did a really great job with the Firebase like in their description with the PR. It was like very concise. So I see the value now, like why it's so great. And I think from now on, I'm actually going to do the same now. Yeah.
I had a general question about process in code review. It was great to see the clarity of the other team's pull request as well, because it brings into focus how important communicating through writing is. So I really liked the way that your pull request was written as well. It was easy to pick up and go, okay, this is what is meant to be communicated, and even the comments afterward. It felt like we were talking to you, not like just reading your writing. So that came across really strongly, and that's what I would aspire to in my own writing, is to make it come across strong like that. So that was a great bar to set. Also, I was confused as to, or just I don't know. Like after we have that conversation or add a comment or question, is there an additional responsibility that we need to follow up on? Like we open a conversation, we ask a question, but that's not meant to hold anything up. Like how do we resolve?
I think it depends on the content of the conversation.
Okay.
So when you do a code review, there are times where you just have a question, then you're not asking for changes, right? This is the default to approval is, I have a question to Rafa and Dev about the nav link. But if you notice in the PR, I still approved it, as in like it's not a must change. And if there is something that is not meeting the acceptance criteria, then I would request a change. And in that case, if I request a change, then I would expect the work to be done and then to be invited to review again, which you can do that as part of GitHub, as in to request review again. And that could happen depending on what you're building and for any future things, right? So that's one part. So yeah, so it really depends on the content. But if it's approval, in the ideal world, if it's approved, the team can merge it.
Right. So you want to be careful with that comment option. When you do the review, there's those 3 approve, comment, or request changes. typically you're going to want to either approve or request changes. The comment would basically be, if you have a burning question and you don't know if you can approve it until you get the results, the answer to that question, then you might leave a comment. Like you might not necessarily have any changes to request yet, but if they answer it and you're like, oh no, that's not, like, now I have changes to request, or now I can approve. Like, but other than that, you pretty much want to either say what your request is for changes or give an approval.
Okay, thank you for clarifying those things. It had been my first time to actually select from that list. So when I first did it, I didn't realize what the distinctions were between those actions. So that helps me understand. Thank you.
And to jump off of Dana's question, like, I guess in terms of like keeping the pace of what we're doing, say we do agree with the comments that were given and we want to make those changes, should we send in a new commit afterwards, or should we just like keep on trucking, even if it's not holding off?
I think it's fair to push another commit, because at the end of the day, it's your set of changes. And if you feel that the person gave you really good feedback and you're like, oh, I didn't think of that, I really wanted to do it this way, and you have the time, I would do it. Yeah.
I also have another question regarding that. Since Tanner brought up the fragment thing, since we're probably gonna have new partners next week, so I'm assuming since like the feedback you guys give us like today, right? Should we change that like today, or how should we go about it?
Sure. I think we don't have like a formal, it has to be certain things. Like, I think because last week we said that we'll merge it for you. So what you can do is you still can make changes to it and then let us know where you're happy, and you can request another review, or let us know in the comments like, oh, I made these changes, I like it, can you merge it for me? And then maybe next week we'll try an instance where you can merge it yourself, because I want to empower you to do it and not have to like wait for somebody else.
Cool.
Okay, so for this week, should we ask you guys to like check the PR then?
Tanner, Rob?
Doesn't matter to me. I did leave approvals on, I was a little behind on it, but I left approvals on all of them. And the comments I left, like the fragment thing, it was more just like something to think about. But it had no, like Rob said, like it can be merged the way it is and it doesn't affect anything at all. So we could just as easily merge them in their current state. The comments I left were more just kind of food for thought moving forward.
I just read the comments you left also. Thank you for including a link for a React way to do something. I'm going to follow up and take a peek at that later
Sure,
on.
yeah, no problem.
Appreciate
No
it.
problem.
As far as the follow-up, like personally, when I'm doing PRs, I like to make sure that any follow-up I'm going to do, if it's pretty straightforward, I just do in that MR or PR so that I can merge it just as one chunk. But that said, it could be that maybe you got an approval on Saturday, you decided it was pretty good and you merged it, and then somebody says something on Sunday that you're like, oh, that would be really good to change. I think, and Yenly, you can correct me, or Tanner, it'd probably be okay to open another PR Sunday or Monday that's not related to this next week's issue. It's just its own little cleanup PR. You can open it, somebody can give it a quick thumbs up, and you can merge that as well. So you don't have to wait until you have like dedicated time to that particular thing again, or until the end of the cohort when we're going to do like the polish stage.
I second that. If you have the bandwidth and you want to do refactoring cleanup, go for it.
I also wanted to ditto. Oh, I was
Go
just going to say I wanted to ditto a couple of things that Yenly had mentioned that popped out. Screenshots, I love. You don't want a PR that's just a screenshot of here's the thing. You do want words too, but it's really nice to just get your bearings on immediately, like what we're looking at. And then what was the other thing? I forgot what it was. It might have been the default to approval. I think that's really nice. Whenever you and that saves you kind of a mental space too. If you're like, I have a couple of things that I wanted to throw out there, but I don't, have to think about coming back here to approve it after these little tiny nitpicks that I posted are addressed. So you can just kind of throw out some ideas, but then still give it an approval and be done.
One final thought that I want to put out there in what Rob said, like as a code author, you want to avoid like a 6-month-long branch. Yes, because there's a lot of merge conflicts that you don't want to do. So at my team currently, the way we scope work and the way we break down work and task is to make sure that they're small enough PRs so that when it goes into approval, it's very easy for someone to see and go, okay, yeah, this simple thing, it gets approved and it's done. And then, it's like building blocks. Think in terms of building blocks as you're going forward. Smaller ones. I think that's all I have. I'll share the slides. I definitely recommend reading the article that I shared at the very end. And happy to answer any questions if you have, like things will come up. Please ask in Slack. We can do it async. Hand it to you, Tanner.
Cool. Yeah, I'll take it from here. Let's see. So we're on now week 2 of 8, which means after this week, we'll already be a quarter of the way through, which is kind of crazy. Our teams this week are Viviana and Dev, and Dana and Rafa. So those are our teams, and then here are our issues. And allow me to share my screen as I've got some stuff up to show you. So we're working on issues 3 and 4. Both of them have their own quirks, and they all work with our old friend Firebase a decent amount. So if you were one of the teams that got away with not touching Firebase last week, well, this is your week to shine. Let's see, issue 3 here, I'll start by reading off. As a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so I can start tracking purchased items. This one does some fun stuff with local storage within the web browser. So you generate a new unique token, saving that to storage, and then there's some logic around if you don't have a list, be able to create one and create that token and store it in the local storage. And then if you find the user has already stored a token in the local storage, then when they visit the page, we should fetch that and return that to the user. And those are all listed here in the acceptance criteria. This one specifically, I just wanted to call out, there is a Collab Lab repo that we use for getting the token, as well as this words package, which I believe is used to, I think it's generating a token, but I don't recall exactly. But just keep an eye on this because it does, I've seen it catch some developers off guard before. Because again, it's one of those things where it's like, there's a way of doing this. And if you don't know that, you can get kind of lost in the sauce. So that is issue number 3. And then issue number 4, as a user, I want to add a new item to my shopping list so I can start recording purchases. So this was kind of set up for us last week. We have the ability to add some things like green beans in our demo. But this kind of expands upon that and allows users to define the name of the item and things like that. So a little bit of an extension of what we've seen already. Again, going to be working with Firebase and extending the model we have in Firebase to accept more than just a name, but things like last purchase date and some things like that. And of course, the acceptance criteria are all outlined here. Does anyone have any preferences between the two? Issue 3, again, working with local storage a little bit, and then issue 4, kind of expanding on our Firebase models. And just a reminder, here are the groups this week, week 2, right here.
3, please.
3, all right.
3, please.
Deal, you got it. I think that'll be just fine. Cool. So I will assign you to. Let's see here.
I was psyched to see that package with the token and the words. I was trying to wrap my brain around how would that work exactly. And then I read further. I'm like, yes, that
Yeah.
looks fun.
Yeah, I agree. Without that, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you could probably spend some time just thinking about that exact problem. So it's nice that they offer that for you there. So let me assign issue 4 here as well. Go and cool. Okay, we are assigned then. After this call, I'm going to figure out how to use that thing that Yenly used last week to get the threads spun up. And we can coordinate using that thread to decide on a time and place to work on these together. And then also I'm in charge of office hours. So later this week, I'll be sending out a poll to figure out a time and day for that. And we can all hang out and talk together. So hopefully you find the time. And that's issues. Oh,
I have two things,
Yes.
just kind of like a feedback. One, I think I want to recommend, like, as a team, to organize and get together and talk about how you want to model your data moving forward, and also how you want to model like architecture of components and files and such early on. So it's definitely recommend to schedule time if you want to together, and then figure that out so that you can avoid merge conflicts. And then 2, I think one thing we didn't really highlight last time is the communication part of, let me share my screen. Trying to show, where am I? So one part of working when you have issues, oftentimes you have the engineering manager or the product manager who's going to come in and look at the project board, and they want to get an overview of what's happening. So I want to highlight that this is a good way of letting somebody know at a really quick level, like issue 2, it's ready for peer review. Good. Those are things as you want to communicate to the team. So for issue 1, you can go and you could drag it, or you can update it in the process. Let's see, where is it? I'm not clear with that. So you can do that. And then when you get to a certain level, so these are communication skills that I definitely recommend as you're working through issues, is to update the status of where you're at so that your team can come in, look at the project board, and know where you are in the process. So
that view is under projects tab, is that
Projects,
correct?
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was not aware.
Sure, that's cool. I mean, this is all new things.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are different ticketing systems have different views. You can also do it in your individual issues. I think there should be progress. Oh, right here. So in the project, you can change from to do, in progress, ready for peer review, version done. A lot of times engineering managers will look at the dones and write up like, oh, this week, here are the things that we fix, here are the features we build. And a lot of times engineering managers don't want to have to chase you down for that information. They just want to go to the project board, get a sense of where everything are, and they can communicate out to the team. So that's all I have. How's it feeling, everybody?
This is like my funnest part of the week. I don't know if like I'm weird or something, but I love this. I'm so glad that everybody's here. It's like super experience.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm like absorbing everything right now. So yeah, it's nice.
It's cool to learn new things.
Mhm.
Really
I'm
fun.
definitely learning a lot.
Yeah, collaboration. I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Looking forward to Oh, do we have demos next? We don't have demos next week. We have retros next week.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And we will send some information out during the week to remind you.
Where's the videos posted, by the way? The Zoom videos?
On YouTube. So if you look in our Slack channel under pin items, I added all under that list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah. Cool. You're also on top of everything. It's like we're finishing
Yeah.
early.
I wanted to ask, how do you want to go about scheduling meeting up so we can talk about what she was saying? Do we don't do like a let us meet? Is that I think that's the fastest way, or I think it's hard with like 4 people.
Maybe we could just coordinate through a Slack thread.
Okay, that works.
And like,
Yeah.
honestly, I'd kind of prefer like asynchronous communication for something like that personally, just because my week can be kind of hectic.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. I guess that's that, huh? Another week down.
That was interesting. I think, Yenly, I don't know if you were saying the word cool, but I saw your lips move and I heard Tanner's voice, and it was an interesting experience. All right. Well, I guess we'll see everyone next week then.
Have a great
Yeah.
week.
All right, bye.
Cool.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you guys.
Hey, everyone.